Chris O'Connor here. Join our fabulous Curmudgeonly community on Facebook at facebook.com/group/curmudgeonrock. Also look out for a Spotify playlist dedicated to this episode. Now, let's get started.
This is the Curmudgeon Rock Report, and this is your podcast made by rock geek iconoclastic outsiders for rock geek iconoclastic outsiders. For those of you who lament that rock music has gone the way of jazz and slipped into niche genre status, we are here to keep that flame alive by providing insight, analysis, recommendations, and honest takes, not hot takes. And hey, there's a good chance you'll learn some rock history you never knew before. About a year ago, we did an episode called The Best of the Neil Young Archives So Far, where Curmudgeon Chris, the resident Neil Young-ologist of this podcast, gave his picks of the best live material and studio outtakes from the first 2 volumes of Young's massive archive series. You'll notice that episode's title had the words "so far" in it. That implied that more was coming, as Young himself in interviews and in posts on his website mentioned several times that a 3rd volume was imminent. Well, it arrived a couple of months ago, and my God, is it a doozy. A whopping 17 CDs and 5 Blu-ray discs containing 11 films of live performances comprise this colossus of content. The box set spans the years 1976 to 87, and the 17 CDs contain complete live shows, alternate versions of previously released material, outtakes from albums, and never-before-released material. If you're an Uncle Neil fanatic like Chris is, it's manna from heaven. Here's the problem. The entire box set is, as of this podcast, available only in physical media form. It isn't on any music streaming platform/service, and more annoyingly, especially for me, it isn't on any of the torrent download sites. What is available online, however, is a 16-track sampler disc called a quote-unquote takes disc that represents and has representative songs from each of the box set's 17 CDs. We're going to review that disc, but on top of that, Chris is going to share his findings from what he found online regarding material that is most likely in this 3rd volume box set. Personally, while I'm a huge Neil fan, even I won't go into defending his 1980s output, which I consider mostly horrible. In fact, the 1980s was a rough decade for most of the legends of the 1960s and 70s. Needless to say, it'll be entertaining to hear Chris try to convince me of the underrated greatness of select songs from otherwise stinker albums like Trans, Reactor, and Everybody's Rockin'. So, let's kick back in our ripped jeans and flannel shirts as we peruse through this recent massive gift from the godfather of grunge. Welcome to the Curmudgeon Rock Report's Curmudgeonly exclusive review of the Neil Young Archives Volume 3 Takes Disc and more.
Hey, Arturo.
Yeah.
There's a special place. There's a very special place.
We need that special place now.
Yeah, we need that special place in our lives, especially because right now, living in this universe really, really sucks. We're recording this 5 days after the American presidential election, and so, God damn it, we need a parallel universe in our lives, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
Parallel universe. Not only is Kamala Harris president in the parallel universe, but rock and roll is still also predominant. It's the thing, man. It's in the arenas. It's on the billboards. It's on the cover of Rolling Stone. There's such a thing as cities with more than one rock and roll station in them. Yeah. Imagine that. So that's just a long way of saying that these parallel universe segments that we do are our excuse to delve into new and newish music and find albums by artists we think that you'll dig and that that we think in a parallel universe would be stars or would be, definitely making a lot of noise. And I think that's the case with your album. I think that, 20-something years ago, maybe 30 years ago, This album by Hinds would be kind of a pop hit, wouldn't it?
Kind of. I mean, maybe. I'd like to think so. But in this parallel universe that we're in right now, it would be. It is, actually. Hailing from Madrid, Spain, the indie band Hinds have been around for almost a decade, putting out their brand of genuinely catchy, hooky pop rock. Since the beginning, they've been led by the singer, songwriter, guitarist duo of Carlota Cosiales and Ana Garcia Perrote. They've had a bit of turmoil in the past few years, though. They lost both their rhythm section and their manager after the release of their 2020 album, The Prettiest Curse. Most bands would have caved in under that kind of pressure, but Cosiales and Garcia Perrote persevered and just this year released their fifth and best album so far, Viva Hinds. The lush shoegaze pop of The Bed, the Room, the Rain, and You is simply sublime. Beck, yes, that Beck, delivers guest vocals on the grinding, funk-tinged boom boom back. On My Own is the kind of sleek sounding, radio friendly alternative pop rock that dominated radio airwaves back in the 1990s. They always have at least one Spanish language song on their records, and this one is no exception with En Forma, a driving slice of anthemic indie rock with a riveting account of depression and despair that proves that their lyricism probably works best in their native language. It's a delightful earworm and a solid 3.5-star album. Chris?
Yeah, I like this album too. It's catchy, and like you said,
Yeah.
just really good pop. I think that The Bed, the Room, the Rain, and You, and Boom Boom Back,
Yeah.
yeah, Boom Boom Back featuring Beck. Yeah, I mean, it kind of blows my mind that Beck, who's like what now, like 54 or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
He's basically like a dirty old man hanging out with these young Spanish chicks, uh, co-writing a song. But it's kind of an odd coupling, but it works because again, it's a very earwormy record. It's just an orthodox pop record,
Yeah.
and it's a fun record. In
Yeah.
some ways, it's a little bit more twee than, let's say, like Wet Leg from a couple of
Yeah.
years ago. So
Yeah.
it's not quite that edgy, but
Yeah.
it's got some spectacular hooks to it, and
Right.
it's an album that I'll probably be revisiting a little bit here over the next week. I'm glad that
Mm.
you turned me on to
Yeah.
them, and
Yeah.
yeah, but what a fate though that they lose their rhythm section and then release their best record. Once
Yeah.
they lose half the band, who knows? Maybe the bandmates were dead weight, and maybe that's a kick in the ass they needed to get
Right.
creatively superlative.
Right.
So
Right.
go figure. So speaking of creatively superlative, we get to talk about the artist that I'm covering here, and that's one of our favorite bands, and a band that we've covered on this podcast early on in the history of this podcast. Actually, we covered them in the
Right.
Parallel Universe.
Right.
Amyl and the Sniffers, and their new album Cartoon Darkness, which is actually quite good. Again, another 3.5 to 4 star album. And well,
Right.
let us describe Amyl and the Sniffers and this album. From its initial outbursts in 2017, Amyl and the Sniffers has been one of the best hard rock bands in the world. Their debut LP is one of my favorite albums of the past decade. It is a rude, crude, mighty bash out punk affair that made an instant rock star out of frontwoman Amy Taylor, whose shtick must be both heard and seen to be believed. She's 100% swaggering sexuality and in your face, fuck you attitude. It's been a trip to see these kids grow in the years since. They followed up that awesome self titled debut with a slightly more mature, but just as rock and comfort to me in 2021. This band really comes from the sort of the oi 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 tradition of
Yeah.
Australian punk, for sure. And now they're back with Cartoon Darkness, which was released in late October. And this is kind of a transitional record for them. The band is still bratty, but they can no
Yeah.
longer be considered juvenile. I mean,
Right.
sure, the best song on the album is probably its bangin' opener, Jerkin', in
Yeah.
which Taylor tells a potential suitor to get out of her face and go play with himself. And also, it's worth checking out the video for this song. It's disgusting but funny. It's basically a bunch of ugly naked people hanging out. So anyway, Other songs on this album find Taylor in a more lovey-dovey mode or in a just having fun mood. Check out the swinging rocker Tiny Bikini, in which Taylor gleefully parades around in, yes, a tiny bikini. And then there's the full thrust punk anthem Motorbike song, which, yes, is all about the joy of riding on a motorcycle. There's also a bit of surprising introspection that creeps into the mix, though,
Yeah.
which finds the band slowing down a bit to express some real poignancy and pathos. That's the case on the damn near ballady Big Dreams, in which
Mm.
Taylor roots for friends to get out of a rut and move forward in life. The drums don't actually hit till midway through the song on that one. There's also the song Bailing on Me, which is a gentle tune that borders on mid 80s British new wave in aesthetic and mood. On that
Mm.
song, we find Taylor heartbroken and forlorn, but gaining wisdom post breakup. Ultimately, though, Taylor's bawdier side wins out, making this another satisfying middle finger of a record that's now making a career for a band that's now making a career out of such sonically outlandish gestures. The anthemic dance rock tune "You Should Not Be Doing That" makes it clear that, to paraphrase the lyrics, not everyone makes it alive, makes it out alive when they're young. The
Mm.
song is one of several instances where bassist Gus Romer shines just as brightly as Taylor on Cartoon Darkness. This is a strong little album, 13 songs, 33 minutes, and you should go seek it out as soon as possible. It's a pretty nifty listen, right, Art?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I gave it three and a half stars. This album to me represents a transitional record for them. And for most bands and artists, transitional records aren't always that great. It's the one after that really shows the leap forward. With their previous album, speaking from Amy Taylor's perspective, the previous album, "Comfort to Me," which was my pick for album of the year in 2021, lyrically she showed, I think, a big leap with
Yeah,
more
big leap.
emotional introspection and subtle socio-political commentary. On this album, she kind of ditches the socio-political commentary aside and focuses more on the introspection. And musically, the band slows things down a bit here. They're playing slower and they're doing songs, like you mentioned, that aren't quite ballads, but it's like ballads, Amyl and the Sniffers style, as
Yeah.
ballady as they can get.
Yeah, I was going to say about as ballady as an oi 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 punk band can get.
Yeah, this is not Bon Jovi power ballad territory by any
Nope,
means.
nope. No,
But
no, no bed of roses
no
by.
bed of roses here. Yeah,
Yep.
but yes, it is a strong record, and so some really good guitar playing as well. I'm looking forward to see what they do for the next record. I think this is the jump off, the pivot point between their early raucous sound and maybe something a little more different coming ahead. I think this is the pivot record, the way I
Yeah,
see it.
I think a surprise for me is that it's a lighter record than Comfort to Me.
Yes.
Because she was pretty heavy, both in
Yeah.
terms of her attitude, but also in terms of subject matter. There was a
Right.
sort of commentary on Australian society on that album, but here it's
Right.
just her hanging out and having fun and being a brat,
Right.
and so it's more sort of narrow to her just immediate sphere of influence, and
I mean, they've made headways too. Like the Comfort to Me came out in 2021. They spent 2022 on tour, doing tours opening for both Weezer and Green Day.
yep,
The next year, 2023, last year, they did tours opening for both Smashing Pumpkins and Nine Inch Nails.
yeah.
This year they spent most of the year recording the album. They're doing a UK Europe tour, which they're probably in the middle of right now. So like they're putting their profile out there. They're getting there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I think that, like you said, that they've been slowly building their profile, like those opening gigs for those Gen X bands,
Yeah.
has been kind of a big score for them. And I think that, like for instance, the song "You Should Not Be Doing That" on Spotify that has 6.5 million plays,
Wow.
which for this group is pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really good. And so
Yeah.
they are growing in profile. And so, like you said, this is kind of a transitional record, and this might be the break, the album before the big breakout comes.
Right.
Let's say they do an album in 26 or 27. That could be the big breakout that makes them international stars, which I'm
Right.
looking forward to because again, you turned me on to them 7 years ago, and
Yeah.
I've been a huge fan of them ever since. So
We we
more
we we
power.
we have we have too many female pop stars who are polite. We need some badass female pop stars, and Amy
Yeah,
Taylor fits that mold.
yeah, she's a badass. She really is something. Like the cover of this record is basically her flashing the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I was gonna say she has no problem letting them all hang out. Chris here again. Arturo and I have differing feelings about the subscription streaming service Spotify. While he likes to rail against the algorithmic component, I like the ability to find and then manage a personal catalog of music. The program is especially great for assembling playlists. Well, guess what? We've assembled a playlist to accompany this episode. The playlist features a healthy mix of all the music we describe and analyze during the episode. Think of it as a soundtrack to your curmudgeonly life. Find the link in this episode's description. And also become a member of our Curmudgeonly community on Facebook if you haven't done so already. Let's now return to our regularly scheduled programming. So, the good news is, despite the fact that this thing is a $450 on CD and probably already sold out because there was only 5,000 copies of it made available,
Right.
which is really annoying. The good news is that most of this, or a lot of the stuff that's on these CDs, is already available, either through previous releases or deep in the recesses of YouTube. So, with a little bit of homework, you will be able to enjoy quite a bit of this record, right, Art?
Yeah, in bootleg form. There's some YouTube bootleg stuff of this, of a lot of the material on this, or stuff that represents this material. And we'll get into that. But let's start with CD one. Okay, now,
And of course, we're talking about Neil Young, in case you didn't
yes,
catch us
yes, Neil
on the
Young,
perimeter.
the third volume of his archive series, 17 CDs. It's stuff previously unreleased material, outtakes, stuff from recording sessions that he abandoned, and lots of live stuff as well. And what he did put out is a quote unquote takes CD. It's like 16 tracks with each song a representative of the CDs on the box set. So we're gonna go through each CD. I'll describe what's on it. Chris will give us his Neil Young-ologist take on the representative track from the takes disc and other stuff from the disc that he unearthed. So let's start with CD one. It's called Across the Water 1. It's live at the Budokan Hall in Tokyo, March 11th, 1976. What's the representative track from this disc on the takes disc, Chris?
The representative track from Across the Water One is "Let It Shine."
Mm,
And this is an interesting one because Let It Shine was originally released as part of the Stills Young Band's Long May You Run from 1976.
also this year, yeah.
Yeah, not part of the official Neil Young catalog. It actually was released as the Stills Young Band, and
Yeah,
Stills as in Stephen Stills.
right.
And obviously the song "Long May You Run," which is the most famous song from it, is on that record. But there's this song "Let It Shine" on the disc, or on "Long May You Run." It's a mid-tempo little country rocker with Stills clearly on backing vocals, and it's kind of a little bit of a little bit of a rock bop. Here it gets the solo acoustic treatment. It actually opened up the show in Budokan. So this is just to give a little bit of context on volume two of these archives. There's a disc that was released as part of that called Odeon Budokan,
Mm,
and what Odeon Budokan is it's the acoustic half of a show that was done in the Hammersmith Odeon, and the electric half of a show that was done in Budokan. This
right,
show
right.
in Budokan. It's so basically what this disc is everything from the Budokan show featured in Odeon Budokan that's not on Odeon Budokan. And so it's the acoustic part of the show from Budokan, plus the stuff from the electric half that didn't make it to Odeon Budokan. So, but anyway, Let It Shine. It's a lovely solo acoustic version of just Neil playing his guitar, and it just has a nice sheen to it, and just pretty vocal to it. And I mean, Neil at this point, remember, this is in March of 1976, which might actually be the apex for Neil. I
Well,
mean,
he's coming out of the ditch period. All those dark, morose records he did. He's
yeah,
starting to lighten it up a little bit.
and he's writing all the stuff that would find its way onto stuff like Rust Never Sleeps and Comes a Time. He's starting to write it during this period,
Right.
and and then other songs that didn't see the light of day for like 15 years come out of this period too. So this was like a hugely prolific songwriting period for him.
Mm.
And so Let It Shine is one of those songs that came out of it. And it's just this beautiful little performance and just, great vocal on it. And it's got a really funny lyric on it where he says, "I got religion in the airport, my lord. They caught me waiting for my baggage when I was bored."
Mm.
Which at the time the Hare Krishnas were a big thing at airports, and so
Yeah.
for that's kind of a shticky, almost stoner logic kind of line.
Yeah. Right.
It's almost like something that Stephen Malkmus would have pulled out 20 years later. So marvelous little version of that. And check this out, by the way. So again, this disc is everything from the Budokan Hall show from March 11th, 1976. That's not on Odeon Budokan, but this is the acoustic set
Mm.
from the Budokan show. It's Let It Shine, Mellow My Mind, Too Far Gone, Only Love Can Break Your Heart, A Man Needs a Maid, No One Seems to Know, and Heart of Gold. Can you imagine? That must have been amazing to consume all of that in a row
Yeah.
with Neil doing it solo.
Right.
So just a lot of great stuff, especially "Only Love Can Break Your Heart," which is one of his best songs. And so
Mm.
any solo version of that must be fantastic. So
You,
so
by the way, you can go on YouTube and there is a video in color, not the best video quality. I think it was copied from VHS, from videotape, but it's in color of this exact show from March 11th, 1976. It's not the complete show. It's like 44 minutes of the show. And it mixes some of the acoustic stuff with some of the electric stuff. Not the complete show, but it is 44 minutes and you can find it on YouTube.
yeah, there you go. And again, this disc is not the entire show either. This Across the Water one disc, but it's most of it.
Yeah.
It's most of that show. It's all the stuff that wasn't on Odeon Budokan.
Right.
That makes it onto here. So Let It Shine. Sounds really great. Art, any thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I just gave it to you. The YouTube video. Go check it out.
Okay.
It's really good. Like I said, video quality not that great, but it is good. It's historic and it's cool seeing young Neil in color with his, in his flannel blue jean regalia. It's Neil looking like Neil.
Yeah,
You know.
there you go. There you go. Neil
Uh,
looking like Neil. And
yeah.
and, and Neil sounding like Neil too,
And sounding
especially
like himself too. Yeah.
and that carries over into the next disc.
Right. CD2 is called Across the Water 2. This is live at the Hammersmith Odeon, London, March 31st, 1976, just 20 days later after the Tokyo show. Plus, with one track from the Apollo Theatre in Glasgow, in Scotland, April 2nd, 1976. So, what's the representative track from this disc, Chris?
Okay, so the representative track is a live version of Drive Back,
Uh-huh.
which was originally released as a Crazy Horse rocker from Zuma, and
Yeah.
here again he's playing it with Crazy Horse and rocking it out. And
Yeah.
again, this is this show from the Hammersmith Odeon in London, March 31st. Speaking of YouTube, this entire show, all
Yeah.
1 hour and 48 minutes of it is available on YouTube. So
Video or just the audio?
just the audio.
Okay.
And so if you type in Neil Young Hammersmith Odeon March 31st, 1976, this show will a recording of this show will come up the entire thing. And so so the and what this disc has is it has 3 songs from the opening acoustic set, including a banjo only version of Human Highway, which is great,
Yeah.
just fantastic. But then the acoustic half has this version of Drive Back, and it's pretty gnarly. It's longer than it is on the record, and the solo is kind of weird. That at one point, I think Neil gets a little bit lost because the solo kind of goes in a place that the band is not in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's just this kind of awkward soloing, and so it's one of these sort of definitely live and in color moments from the show. Like I said, it gets clunky, and but Neil does get in kind of his own zone,
Yeah.
and but he finds his way back. By the end of the solo, he's back in step with the band, so which is a good thing. So yeah, definitely recommend finding this show on YouTube. But Drive Back, it's I've always thought it's one of the more underrated Crazy Horse songs. It just really
Underrated
rousing,
album. Zuma's one of
underrated
my
album.
favorite. Zuma's one of my favorite Neil records.
Yeah, and it's one of the most rousing songs from that record. So, and that's what's here, and it pretty much rocks out, although not in the most soothing way. Again, it's a little bit
Yeah.
clunky, and so it's I'm curious as to why he chose to release this as part of the takes disc and not something else,
Right.
because again, it's not the most polished take,
Yeah.
you know. So
Yeah. I mean, my take on my take on this is that this is 1976. A couple of episodes ago in our third Golden Age of Rock series, we talked about the year 1976 being ground zero for punk, especially in the UK. And here is Neil in the UK, in London, as punk is just blowing up in 1976, doing all this proto grunge,
yep,
which kind of like leads you to believe like of all those like 1960s, 70s legacy hippie rock era artists, Neil Young is one of the few to actually like kind of like avoid the anger of punk. And
yep,
he was one of the few artists to actually like, what's the word I'm looking for? Not feel one with the punks, but actually just kind of sympathize with the punks. He actually
yep.
on many interviews, like he said how much of a Sex Pistols fan he was, and
Hmm.
and he name checking Johnny Rotten on Hey Hey My.
Yep.
So it's interesting how Neil like kind of skirted along away from the vitriol of the punks. The punks hated Pink Floyd. The punks hated Led Zeppelin. They hated the Rolling Stones. But Neil Young kind of avoided their ire. And then like 16
Yep.
years later, he became the godfather of grunge.
Yeah, go figure.
Hmm.
He survived that period unscathed, and he embraced it.
And
Uh,
he put out some of his best music too.
yeah, absolutely. Especially, a couple years later with Rust Never Sleeps. I mean, some of that stuff is just extraordinary,
Yeah.
and really does have that punk energy, especially the electric half of that record is just it's just magnifique,
Yeah.
magnifique. So disc three, what do we got?
Okay. Disc three is called Hitchhiking Judy. It's recording sessions from Malibu, California on August 11th, 1976. There are also some select songs from a solo acoustic tour he did in November 1976, probably the cool down after this big global trot that he did, and then performing with the band for what would become The Last Waltz, the movie The Last Waltz, a couple of performances that he did with them, namely all of them together doing their version of Helpless with Joni Mitchell on background vocals. This is from the Winterland Ballroom, San Francisco, November 25th, 1976, and a previously unreleased studio track with Ron Wood of the Rolling Stones on New Year's Eve, 1976. So a bit of a mishmash. I don't know why the mishmash, but you can tell us, Chris. But first, what's the representative track here?
Okay, yeah, it is a mismatch, but the representative track is Hitchhiker. And
Uh-huh.
Hitchhiker is the title track to an album that eventually found the light of day. It's one of these mythical unreleased records that Neil had like three or four of these mythical unreleased records that were never
Yeah,
actually released, but
right.
but then eventually found their way out as part of this archive project. In 2011, Hitchhiker's released, and this has actually cross pollination with another one of those mythical unreleased records
Right.
called Chrome Dreams.
Right.
And Chrome Dreams is actually is a featured part of Volume Two of
Hmm.
the
Archive
of the
series.
Archives series. And so like both Hitchhiker and Chrome Dreams have the original studio versions of Powderfinger and Pocahontas. So it's just really really strong stuff. But Hitchhiker is a weird song. It's just a solo acoustic kind of almost, it has that kind of Rust Never Sleeps, almost like that kind of energy that those acoustic songs have. But it's this tale of rambling on the road, running away from responsibility, doing lots of drugs, and meeting people and the such. And the weird part about it is that he took part of the tune and part of the lyrics from this song Hitchhiker, and he refashioned it as the song Like an Inca, which
Uh-huh.
ended up finding release as part of the 1982 album Trans, which
Yeah.
I love and you don't. Uh, but it's probably the best song, the best non-vocator version, division song from Trans.
Yeah.
And there's a lyric that closes this song, Hitchhiker. It's a very kind of surrealist line that goes, "I wish I was an Aztec or a runner in Peru. I would build such beautiful buildings to house the chosen few, like an Inca from Peru." And it just is sort of like almost like mystical uh, sentiment that shows up here. And he took that closing lyric from this song and made that into the chorus of Like an Inca,
Yeah.
and including the tune. And so it's got kind of a weird history in that sense. And Hitchhiker also, in addition to the 2011 release of the Hitchhiker album, or the mythical Hitchhiker album, he also did a version of Hitchhiker for this really strange but actually kind of cool record that he did with producer Daniel Lanois in 2010 called Le Noise.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
and which is basically just him just him and a solo electric guitar, like just really noisy, really gnarly, uh,
Soundscapes, basically.
yeah, soundscapes and like echoey kind of shit. But he
Yeah.
did a version of this song Hitchhiker on that
Mm,
record as well.
mm.
So kind of a weird history for this song. As for this disc, so it has 6 songs from Hitchhiker, the album, or the mythical album Hitchhiker, including Powderfinger and Pocahontas, those versions. But it also includes a bunch of songs from a live album that he released in 2018 called Songs for Judy, which
Mm.
are performances from that solo acoustic tour from November of
Right.
1976. There's including shows from New York and Boston and a few other places. The highlights of that album, Songs for Judy, which it's always been one of my more favorite live albums from Neil. An early version of White Line. So this is 1976. White Line didn't find its way onto an album until 1990 with
Yeah.
when
Ragged Glory. Yeah.
Ragged Glory. It's
Yeah.
track 2 from Ragged Glory, but here it's solo acoustic and it's beautiful. And then he also has a version of Too Far Gone, which was released as part of Freedom in
Mm,
1989. So he
mm.
has these songs that he played live and sat on for a long time and never released as part of a studio record. And it took him 13 and 14 years to release those songs, but beautiful versions of both of those are on these Songs for Judy tracks that make it
Mhm.
onto Hitchhiking Judy. And for what it's worth, that Ron Wood song, it's actually not an unreleased original. It's an early version of a song called Lost in Space,
Mm.
which shows up on Hawks and Doves, which is a
Oh.
rather mediocre record from 1980. It was actually the
To say
follow-up.
the least.
Yeah, it's the follow-up to Rust Never Sleeps, and obviously it was a significant drop-off. He goes,
Yeah.
"Comes a time, great. Rust Never Sleeps, all time great.
Yeah.
Hawks and Doves, mediocre as shit." But Lost in Space is probably the best song on that record. It's actually a really pretty, really nice solo acoustic number. But I could just imagine, because I guess on this version, which I haven't heard because again it hasn't been released, it's Neil on piano and Ronnie Wood on guitar, which probably means slide guitar. And
Yeah.
so that must sound really, really strange, but in a way it's cool because again it's a pretty song. So I could just imagine those two really knocking it out of the park. Uh,
Yeah. I mean, my take on this is that like Neil has always professed to be a big Rolling Stones fan. He's always
Yep.
been a massive Stones fan. So I wonder if this is like getting Ron Wood as close as Neil can get to the Stones sound, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I imagine. And maybe they were just hanging out. It's worth mentioning, by the way, that the song Hitchhiker has 3.2 million plays on Spotify, which basically means it's the single from the takes
Oh,
disc.
wow.
So it's kind of it's the feature song. Of all
Hmm.
the takes, this is the top take.
Wow. Interesting.
Yep.
All right. The next CD in this box set series is pretty epic. CD4 Snapshot in Time. They are solo. The disc is solo acoustic sessions with Linda Ronstadt and Nicolette Larson on doing backup vocals, and these sessions took place in Trancas, California, March 1st, 1977. Plus one more session from Trancas, California, on December 15th, 1977. What's the
Yeah.
representative track here, Chris?
Really, there's only one song from the December 15th. This whole disc is basically it's that what amounts to demo recordings from March 1st, 1977 at this Trancas, California location. The representative song is the song "Hey Babe,"
Yeah,
which here is actually really lovely,
yeah.
just solo acoustic. And he announces at the beginning of the recording that he had just wrote it the day before. So
Mm,
he's kind of springing it on Ronstadt and Larson clearly because they're clearly improving the backup vocals and the
yeah.
harmony vocals. They're kind of, la 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 la,
Yeah.
they're finding their space as they go along. But Hey Babe is a really cool little song. It was originally on American Stars and Bars, which is
Yeah.
his album from 1977. And on that track, it's Crazy Horse and Ben Keith
Mm,
uh, doing the instrumentation with Larson and Ronstadt also doing backup vocals there, and that was actually recorded a month later.
mm.
But this session that he did, which again amounts to solo acoustic demos, they
Right.
were recorded by Young and a guy that he would work with years later as a producer, a guy named Nico Bolas,
Mm,
who was an engineer who ended up producing "This Note's for You" and "Freedom"
mm.
many years later. But just really lovely take on it, and it's just a strong vocal from Neil, and it's almost a little bit faster than it is actually on the American Stars and Bars version, which again, and that amounts to country rock because he's
Yeah.
plugged in on
Right.
that. No one, he's got Ben Keith, who is like his pedal steel
Yeah.
guitar weapon. He's got so it's very countryish, but he's plugged in for that
Mm.
take. Here, it's just acoustic and it's straightforward and it's really, really pretty. And again, Ronstadt and Larson, it's so weird because they're not really singing.
Yeah.
They're kind of they're almost
They're vamping basically.
yeah, they're basically vamping and scatting,
Yeah.
and finding the spots. And then it's kind of neat at the end. It's kind of one of these uh, one of these time capsule type of things with Ronstadt at the end going, "Oh, that's nice," and it's great for harmonies too.
Yeah.
And she chimes in and says that. So, but this disc, I wish more of it was available. I wish I could find some of it on YouTube. I wasn't able to find much of it. So, this disc is probably the one I'm looking most forward to because it has a lot of stuff that he was you just working with that ended up finding its way onto American Stars and Bars and Comes a Time and some of the albums in and around 77. So it just seems like a neat disc and a neat
Yeah.
exercise.
Nicolette Larson, she had a big hit with a Neil
Yep,
Young song in 1978 called Lotta Love. It
absolutely.
went it went to number 8 on the Billboard pop chart, and her version is lovely. It's really nice, but I much prefer Neil Young's original, also from the year 1978. It's on the Comes a Time album
Yep.
because that's as sublimely pop as Neil ever got.
Oh yeah, it's sublimely pop, but he does it with Crazy Horse too. So it's kind of
Yeah,
it's got just enough edge to
right.
it's like pop with edge,
Yeah,
pop with balls.
yeah,
Is essentially what it is, and it's got that really lovely little la 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 la
yeah.
la
Yeah,
la. Yeah.
That's the hook of the song, really.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so Nicolette Larson and then yeah, Linda Ronstadt, who, it's interesting. She worked with Neil before. She was one of the backup singers on Harvest along with
Yeah,
James Taylor.
yeah.
And then she returned in 1992 to sing backup vocals on Harvest
Harvest Moon.
Moon,
Yeah,
the album there. So
right.
Ronstadt does have some history with Neil. It's
Yeah,
kind of neat. I think by 77 she had already blown up as a superstar, hadn't she?
yeah. She was already big by then. All right, the
Yeah.
next disc, CD5 Windward Passage. They are recording sessions with a band called The Ducks. And these recording sessions took place in Santa Cruz, California during the summer of 1977. Chris, what's the representative track here?
Okay, well, the representative track is a version of Sail Away, which
Mm,
is a studio track that found its way onto Rust Never Sleeps. It basically
yeah,
was tacked on to what otherwise were live renditions of songs there.
right.
But here, there it's like this beautiful lilting country-ish pop song.
Yeah,
Here it's just straightforward, just like country rock, and
yeah,
it just bar band rock. It's basically a bar band rock tune
right.
as done by the Ducks. Now, to back up, what's the story of the Ducks? So in summer of '77, uh, Neil was living in and around Santa Cruz, California at the time, and he made friends with a couple of guys up there. One guy was a local singer-songwriter named Jeff Blackburn, and
Yeah,
another guy who named Bob Mosley, who was an original member of the band Moby Grape.
yeah.
And they decided to get together along with with a guy who filled in as drummer. And so basically they're just your average bar band with Neil Young on electric guitar. And they gigged around Santa Cruz in the summer of '77. So these aren't really recording sessions. These are
Yeah,
actually recordings from live shows that
yeah.
they did in and
Really? I
around.
thought there were recording sessions. There were live shows, really?
Yeah, yeah. Most of this, and actually half of this disc is actually found the light of day on another previous archives release called
Mm.
High Flying,
Uh-huh.
which we covered on the podcast last year, which is my favorite disc actually from that from all of the archive stuff. That's my favorite thing because essentially, these guys they were kind of a democracy. All four of them wrote songs, and they're just a bar band, just having fun. But it's an average bar band with Neil Young on electric guitar. It's clearly Neil on electric guitar, and
Yeah,
he does versions of he has a Human Highway, Sail Away, and a few
right.
other songs that made it to High Flying. Half of that disc is makes it onto this one as well.
Hmm.
So some of this is not new, but this version of Sail Away is not actually the version that's on High Flying. It's another version that was recorded at a venue called the Steamship on August
Hmm.
1st, 1977.
Right.
And it's a little bit more controlled than the version on High Flying. That one is a little bit more rocked out. It's a little bit more wild. It's not the drumming is louder,
Yeah.
whereas here it's more kind of a clicky kind of country drumming. There, it's more of a rock drumming, and so it's subtly different, but still a great song. And I much prefer this version to the one on Rust Never Sleeps. Even though that version's beautiful, this one is rollicking, and this
Right.
song works better as a rollicking tune than as a beautiful one.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I've heard some of the stuff he's done with the Ducks. I always found it to be a little too sloppy. I mean, I like sloppy. Sloppy can be good. It can be soulful. You're being in the moment. But the Ducks are a little too bar bandish, for
Yeah,
me.
but which makes him fun, and it just the
Yeah.
whole idea of Neil Young being in a bar band is just fantastic to me. They were confined to Santa Cruz because there were contractual obligations that Neil had that barred him from taking them on the road, and so
Right,
that
right,
they had to kind of stick in and around Santa Cruz. And so High Flying is a compilation of stuff from those songs, and this is another compilation
right.
that kind of cross pollinates with that one. So the Ducks are just kind of a neat story. It's just like you imagine being like Jeff Blackburn must be a local legend in Santa Cruz. Neil Young was in my band for 3 months. You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, the next CD, Disc 6, Oceanside, Countryside. These are recording sessions he did in Nashville, May 3rd, 1977. Very, very country music. And solo acoustic recording sessions. Okay. The ones in Nashville, I think, were with a band, doing country music. And solo acoustic recording sessions in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, near Miami, in September 1977. What's the representative track here, Chris?
Okay, the representative track is "Comes a Time,"
Ooh,
and this comes from the Fort Lauderdale sessions, where essentially these were self-made demos by Neil.
demos for
Uh,
Comes a Time, basically.
yeah, and so basically, yeah, it was stuff from "Comes a Time," and I think one or two songs that didn't show up until Hawks and Doves. But
Yeah,
but this is a demo of "Comes a Time" where Neil plays several guitar parts, and it's all Neil and
mm,
stitched together, and it's really a demo quality take. You can tell because the vocals are very raw and distant sounding, and totally not polished at all. And it's definitely unaccompanied, and it's part of that. What he was doing in Fort Lauderdale there in September of 1977. And it's kind of neat. It's comes a time. It's unadorned and stripped down, and so it's just that lovely melody without all the violins and the
yeah,
strings and the Nicolette Larson vocals, and basically on the album Comes a Time, it's a romp. It's a
yeah,
pretty romp, but
right.
here it's just a bare bones acoustic lilting little tune that
Yeah,
essentially Neil kind of half croons
yeah,
in a not so great voice.
yeah,
And so it's
yeah,
neat. So it's kind of neat to hear a demo of Comes a Time.
yeah.
Yeah. So
And
really,
what about have you unearthed anything from the Nashville sessions on this disc?
no, actually I haven't. So this is pretty much a maiden voyage disc that another thing that I'm looking forward to when it finally sees the light of day.
Yeah, or gets to the streaming services.
Yeah, or when it gets to the stream, it might take a while. I mean, I'm just looking at it now. Some of the stuff that made it from the Nashville, a version of Dance 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 is on their Field of Opportunity, which
Mm,
these are recorded at a venue called Crazy Mamas in
mm,
Nashville, and so these are
right.
just sort of live takes on stuff. And the song "It Might Have Been," which
Hmm.
didn't show up until Old Ways, almost a
Right,
decade later. Is
right.
was when that one came out,
Hmm.
and so it's four songs from Nashville, and the rest of the disc is from Fort Lauderdale. And
Uh-huh.
some of the other songs that are feature on that are going back, "Human Highway," "Sail Away," "Peace of Mind." So essentially, it's the comes a time stuff.
All right, next, CD7. It's called Union Hall, and it's from various Nashville recording sessions in November 1977, which leads me to believe this is kind of a continuation of the May 1977 sessions in Nashville. Very country music again, I guess, because he's doing it in Nashville. What's the representative track here?
Okay, the representative track is a previously unreleased song called "Lady Wingshot," which
Uh-huh.
is very, very countryish. And
Mm.
just to let you know, the music on this disc, most of it comes from a single session on
Oh.
November 10th, 1977, at a venue called the Nashville Musicians Union Hall, hence the
Uh-huh.
reason that it's called Union Hall. What it amounts to is this song is it's a glorified rehearsal that it's
Uh-huh.
clearly, a live take and there's no audience, but there's a
Mm.
lot of shuffling in the background,
Yeah.
and it's them basically just polishing this song. But Lady Wingshot, it's basically a country song, and this is the first of several appearances on this disc from the fiddler Rufus Thibodeau, who was a
Uh-huh.
guy that Neil worked with a lot in the '80s. But he shows up here as a fiddle player, and he's on along a lot of these songs. So Lady Wingshot, it's a pretty song, and it's rollicking and it's pretty, and very, very countryish, and it's very much driven by that fiddle. Uh, just to just so you know, some of the other songs that show up on from this Union Hall set that they did. There's a version of "Comes a Time," "Are You Ready for the Country," which must be like really, really great because again,
Yeah.
it's kind of a primitive recording.
Yeah.
It's not the most sophisticated recording, and so old version of "Old Man," "The Losing End," which
Mm,
I can just imagine hearing that with a fiddle player. "Heart
right.
of Gold," "Already Won," which is a song
Mm,
from "Comes a Time," and "Four Strong Winds," which is a
yeah.
cover that was also on "Comes a Time." So, and "Down by the River" actually shows up on that too. So this must be a really great listen because again, it's just this country band just doing a rehearsal
Yeah.
that was recorded live. So
Yeah.
interesting stuff.
Yeah. All right, next, CD8. It's called Boarding House One. Why? Because these come from a series of shows, a series of intimate, really intimate solo acoustic shows that Neil Young did. I think he basically had a week's residence at this small club called the Boarding House in San Francisco from March 24th through the 27th, May 24th through the 27th, 1978. So what's the representative track on the takes disc here?
Yeah, the representative track is Thrasher.
Aha.
And so just to let you know, the boarding house, it was actually five shows. It was the 24th to the 28th. Four of those shows are captured on this first disc,
Mm,
and the 28th show is covered on Boarding House 2, which is disc 9.
hmm.
So, but the version of Thrasher here, now Thrasher was originally released as part of Rust Never Sleeps,
Right.
and there it was one of those live versions where the
Right.
audience part was stripped away.
Yeah.
Here it's a little bit slower. It's a little bit more plaintive. It's not quite as hate sung as it is on Thrasher. The story behind Thrasher is it's about him moving on from Crosby, Stills, and Nash,
Yeah.
where he basically talks about them in terms of being extinct fossils and dinosaurs stuck in amber, and so there's
Well,
all this like
that's what the punk movement did, right?
yeah
That's the effect the punk movement had on Neil Young right there.
yeah, and so there's all this paleontological imagery that shows up on the song, but this is a really really lovely version of it, and a little less harmonica, a little bit slower, and I think just more sincerely sung. I mean, I would call it hate sung on Rust Never Sleeps because he clearly almost the acid was dripping from his voice on that one, and it's actually really funny. So you get to the end of this song, and the audience claps. Somebody yells out from the audience, "Your new stuff is better than your old stuff." And Neil answers, "Hey, today is better than yesterday," and which gets a big applause. So that's
Yeah.
just kind of one of those intimate little nuggets that's
Yeah.
captured from the song. So,
Right.
and it's worth mentioning, by the way, that these boarding house there's a an old bootleg uh, of that compiles songs from these boarding house shows, like 11 or 12 songs from it, and it's available on YouTube. So if you did a search for Neil Young boarding house on YouTube, it'll
Mm.
come up, and it's only got like 600 views or something like that. There's some crazy low number of views. So it must be relatively newly put up there,
Yeah.
but it's a cross section of songs from these shows. One of the standouts from it, I heard it, is it's an early version of the song "Shots,"
Mm.
which shows up on Reactor as a Crazy
Mhm.
Horse workout. But here it's solo acoustic and done, very liltingly and very hauntingly
Mm.
in sort of acoustic neo glory. So it's just interesting to hear one of those crazy, like a total crazy shot, crazy horse romp.
Mm.
Here is reduced to acoustic. So and that's on this Boarding House One disc as well. So definitely worth checking out and something to be excited about.
All right. CD9, Boarding House Two, continuing this week long run of shows he had at this club. But these songs come from one show only. Probably and the last show that he did on this run, May 28th, 1978. But for me, more importantly and more interestingly, is a studio session he did also in San Francisco earlier in the day. This show was in the evening. Earlier in the day, he did a studio session with the new wave pop rock band Devo.
Yep.
And doing a version of Hey, Hey, My with Devo. Chris, what's the representative track here?
Well, the representative track is Hey, Hey, My, Into the Black.
Nice.
With Devo. And it's about as weird as you would expect. It's Mark Mothersbaugh of Devo, the lead singer of Devo, which is, the great sort of they're almost avant-garde sort of electro punk band. It's how would you even describe Devo? They just have a
they were one of the most thrillingly and thoroughly original bands of all time.
Yeah,
there was no one that sounded like Devo.
It's like this electronicized punk music.
Yeah,
is the best way to put it. And so it's their spin on it. So it's this revved up version of Hey Hey My with Neil basically mirroring his guitar work from the version we all know from Rust Never Sleeps, but sped up tempo with synthesizers that Mark Mothersbaugh plays, and Mothersbaugh sings lead.
Yeah,
and so that kind of high pitched weird voice of his, Hey Hey My. And just going from there. And it goes on for 9 minutes and 28 seconds. And it turns into this epic jam that turns into some truly wonky stuff from Neil and eventually becomes just a wall of noise art by the end of it. And it's just really, it's strange, but really, really cool. And it just makes me wonder, I really kind of wish that they had hooked up and made an album together. If like Neil made an album with Pearl Jam, he made an album with Booker T and the MGs, and that was later on. But I really wish he'd have made a full record with Devo. That would have been fabulous. Yeah. And so this is just as quirky as you would expect, but just as cool as you would expect too.
Yeah. According to David Frick, who wrote the review of this third volume of the archive series for Mojo magazine, it was Mothersbaugh, the lead singer of Devo, who came up with the phrase "Hey Hey My." Neil Young wrote the song, he wrote the lyrics, but during this recording session, Mothersbaugh came up with the "Hey Hey My," phrase and the phrasing, and Neil decided, he took that and he wrote lyrics for the song and he made that the song title. So there you go.
Yeah, pretty neat. And again, it's totally his 1953 Gibson Les Paul that features on the song. It's very similar to the playing on the single version from Rust Never Sleeps. So it's pretty cool.
On this episode, we broke down the third volume of Neil Young's archive series. For the next episode, we're getting back on that time machine and visiting 1977 for the next installment in our third Golden Age of Rock series. Punk rock is in full gear, especially in the UK, and completely reshaping the musical landscape, musically and culturally, thanks to the Sex Pistols, The Clash, The Damned, and Wire. But there were other major developments as well. Fleetwood Mac released a pop rock masterpiece. David Bowie released an electronic rock hybrid masterpiece. Kraftwerk released a genre-defining EDM masterpiece. And Bob Marley conquered the world with his masterpiece, probably the greatest and most important reggae album ever made. Join us next time as the Curmudgeon Rock Report brings you the third Golden Age of Rock, 1977. Now we're on CD 10 of the third volume of Neil Young's archive series, and this one is called Sedan Delivery. It's one previously unreleased song recorded at Broken Arrow Ranch, which is Neil Young's home recording studio and his ranch, on August 24th, 1978, and select songs live, all live, from the Rust Never Sleeps album, which is a live album, and the Live Rust album, all from, and the tour, October 1978. So, Chris, what's the representative track here?
Well, the representative track is the only one that hadn't been released before, and that's Bright Sunny Day. Like literally, this album is a compilation of stuff from directly from Live Rust and Rust Never Sleeps.
Yeah.
But it starts with this one throwaway song. It's a complete throwaway called Bright Sunny Day.
Hmm.
And it's this little like 3 minute peppy, corny little rocker. And it kind of the groove is a little bit reminiscent of Powderfinger, but
Yeah.
it's just corny as hell. And it's like like one of the lyrics is "Don't say it's too late to change. I don't want to hear it." And so it's Neil and Crazy Horse being peppy. It
Yeah.
really is a bright sunny day for Crazy Horse, and it's just this. Again, it's just this peppy, corny little rocker. It just I don't know. It's got a nice little solo to it, but it's mostly just a tight little 3 minute pop song. It's clear why it didn't make any albums, or it's only seeing the light of day now. It's not very good, but it's not actually the worst song on this takes disc. But it's close, but it's not actually the worst.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you might as well just get Rust Never Sleeps and listen to that, and or watch the live Rust video. The whole October 1978 Cow Palace show, where Rust
Uh-huh.
Never Sleeps is taken from. The whole video is available on YouTube. You can watch
Yep.
it there. So, and
Hmm.
that's something worth checking out. Okay,
Yeah.
and it's in color too, and it's the full show with the short people dressed like Jawas from Star Wars setting up the
Yeah,
stage.
that would just that made no sense to me. It's like Jow was hanging out, like his roadies are dressed up as Jow. Well, remember he had the giant, he had the giant speakers.
All right, next, CD11. It's called Coastline, and it's just songs that songs from the actual catalog albums, Hawks and Doves from 1980 and Reactor from 1981, plus outtakes from both of those records. Chris, what's the representative track here?
Yeah, the representative track is an outtake from Hawks and Doves called Winter Winds, which is
Hmm.
actually a nice little song. It's a swaying country ditty. It's piano and fiddle driven. Here again, Rufus Thibodeau, the fiddler who appeared earlier, on disc 7, is here. It's not quite a waltz. The tempo bops a little harder than that, but it's a neat little country song. It actually is better than half the shit on Hawks and Doves. It's like I said, Hawks and Doves is not a very good album. It's got Captain Kennedy, and it's got the song that he did with Ronnie Wood there, uh, you know, Lost in Space.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's a piece of shit. But this song Winter Winds is actually quite good, and it's quite representative of what he could do at his best when he went into a country rock mode.
Right.
And so I really wish that this song had made it onto Hawks and Doves. But here's the thing about CD11, and this is kind of a complaint about
Yeah, I was going to say the
this
same
archive
thing.
set, that this is 2 discs in a row. Remember, Sedan Delivery, which is CD10, is basically, with the exception of one song, all stuff from Live Rust and Rust Never Sleeps, which
Yeah.
is the catalog. And here again, this next song is all songs from Hawks and Doves and Reactor,
Yeah.
and then just several outtakes.
Yeah.
So so what do you have to say about that, Art?
No, I think it's kind of a ripoff. I think it's kind of lazy that Neil's doing this. I, can't we just have a CD of outtakes from the albums instead? I think that would be more interesting. But then again, probably not, because Honestly, Neil Young, like a lot of artists and bands from his generation of the 1960s and 70s, the 1980s was a pretty dark decade for them
Yeah.
doing actual good music. Like everybody sucked from that era in the 19 from the 60s and 70s bands and artists. They almost all sucked in the 80s. Neil
Yep.
Young, Joni Mitchell, Paul McCartney,
Yeah.
most of Robert Plant's solo stuff, although some of it was okay. Lou Reed sucked in the
Yeah.
80s as well. I mean, there's no exception. and
Yeah,
and
pretty much. It was a bad decade to be a 60s icon.
it
The
really
Rolling Stones were terrible in the 80s too.
well, after Tattoo You is good from 1981
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
those are outtakes from 1976 and 78, you know?
Yeah, I was gonna
So,
say half that album was made with, like shit. One of the songs has Mick Taylor on it. So yeah. So
yeah.
what are
Yeah,
you
so
gonna
so so
say?
so those are what you get. Anyway, so we move on to CD 12. It's called Trans/Johnny's Island. These are again songs from the catalogs, songs from Trans in 1983, previously unreleased recording sessions from 1982, live recordings from Sherwood Hall in Salinas, California, August 11th, 1982, and the National Exhibition Center Arena in Birmingham, UK, September 24th, 1982. What's the representative track here?
The representative track is a song called "If You Got Love."
Hmm.
And this is an outtake from the other Trans sessions. So Trans is one of his most schizophrenic records. So it's these sessions where he had a band together called the Royal Pineapples,
Hmm.
which included Nils Lofgren
Ooh.
playing Wurlitzer piano and guitar.
Hmm.
Nils Lofgren, of course, from E Street Band fame.
Right.
Uh, and then it was Wurlitzer and percussion and pedal steel, and it was just a very weird mix of instrumentation. And then, of course, the other stuff is the science fiction vocoder vocaled,
Yeah.
like really weird
Yeah.
stuff, which I love, by the way, from Trance. But the new stuff, the I guess on this disc, the value add comes from the outtakes from the Royal Pineapple sessions, and
Hmm.
"If You Got Love" is one of those. And this is a great song. It's got that percussion and Wurlitzer instrumentation to it. Really, really catchy. It's similar to Like an Inca and A Little Thing Called Love, which are two songs from Trance, but just really catchy and just really nice lyric and really sweet sentiment. Uh, Interesting thing about this song is that Neil did an album last year. He released it in December of last year called Before and After, which is
Hmm.
just basically him doing solo reimaginings of songs that he had released over the course of the previous 30 or 40 years. It includes a beautiful acoustic solo performance of "I'm the Ocean," which originally was done on Mirror Ball, which is his album from 1995 with Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
And this song, "If You Got Love," is on that. And it's Neil just with a pipe organ and a harmonica, and so
Hmm.
it's really kind of spooky and really has a haunting quality to it. It's hauntingly beautiful, whereas here it's almost rollicking and pretty and just sort of like a rollicking country rocky. There it's almost like a dirge, the way it plays because of the pipe organ. So just kind of neat to hear Neil get that kind of mileage from this old, sort of forgotten nugget, almost 40 plus year old song that he did as part of the trance sessions.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to get excited about this period of Neil Young because I really don't like his synthesizer vocoder music that he did. I understand lyrically a lot of the songs are about him trying to connect to his mentally disabled son, and that's
Yeah.
cool. I get it,
Hmm.
but it's just it's just the delivery of it, and it's just Neil and synthesizers. It's great that he's this experimental artist that tried all kinds of stuff, and it's awesome that he does. But it's a testament to the fact that not all experiments work, you know.
Yeah.
And for
Well, I
me,
mean, and I disagree with that. I mean, most of the, I think that holds true for most of his stuff from the 80s. But
Yeah.
I really think Trans is a spectacular record. I mean, just the really strong songwriting going on there. And I guess he was inspired by his son Ben, who, suffered from a severe form of cerebral palsy.
Right.
And, a lot of it came from his use of computers to work to communicate with his son. And
Hmm.
so that's where kind of, him taking on the robotic voice and the sort of the robotic persona
Right.
on the vocalized songs comes from. And so
Right.
the poignancy of that has always really struck me. And like songs like Transformer Man and Sample and Hold are actually really good songs, I think.
I like the Transformer Man acoustic of the MTV Unplugged from 1993. I like that
Yeah,
version.
which proves it's a great song because
Right.
removed from all the weird vocalized, all the weird robot vocals.
Yeah.
It just
Right.
proves that the songwriting was there.
Right. All right, next, CD13. It's called Evolution, which is interesting considering how he's really in the throes of his shit phase here.
Yep.
Live solo acoustic songs from the Civic Auditorium in Santa Cruz, California, January. He loved Santa Cruz,
Yep.
January 5th, 1983. More live songs with a band from a club called the House of David in Nashville, January 28th, 1983. I said 85, it was 83. This is all 1983. One live song from the Convention Center in San Antonio, Texas, June 18th, 1983. Again, songs from the catalog that we already know, select songs from Everybody's Rockin', his Rockabilly album, which is pretty horrendous, from 1983, and recording sessions from August 1983 and January 1984. Chris, what's the representative track here?
The representative truck on this one is fascinating, and yes, you're right that this disc is again defined by containing pretty much all of Everybody's Rockin', which is his corny ass rockabilly album from 1983,
Yeah.
and so that makes it on here, and the live songs are basically country rock. He was loading up on the country at this point, and the rockabilly. So that's where it
Right.
comes from. But the end of this disc, it's a 5-song demo that he basically put together in January of 1984, which is him playing with drum machines and a synclavier keyboard, or
Huh.
what you would call it, basically a synclavier, which is just a sort of exotic synthesizer. Uh,
Yeah. It's what Frank Zappa recorded a lot of his music with in the 1980s.
yeah, and so he does this version of the song Razor Love.
Mm.
And Razor Love is a really pretty, it's meant as a country ditty. It was clearly written as a country ditty, and it showed up. It finally was released formally on the 2000 album Silver and Gold,
In its
and
best version.
beautiful song.
Yeah.
And here, I love it. This is my favorite track on this Takes album because it's got this icy quality to it. It's just this icy new wave take on a country ballad. And it's just Neil. It's Neil doing everything. It's just two different drum machines and a synclavier, and him performing the song that way. And it gets this again, almost like an icy detachment, and it's just really, really haunting. It's almost like he wants that love, and it cuts straight through, but it cuts almost in a mechanical, almost industrial way in the way that he does it on here. So predates Landing on Water, where he did similar experiments on Landing on Water, but not nearly as good as this. I really want to hear the other songs that he did from this session, where it was
Mm.
just him working with the synclavier and the drum machines. I wish he'd have done a whole record of stuff that sounded like this, because that would have been spacey as shit. And Landing on Water is not a very good record, and it's more sort of mid '80s pop. It's kind of post new wave. It
Yeah.
kind of it's almost like a kind of almost like keyboard driven rock, and it sucks. But Razor Love is a great song, and here it's done magnificently well in demo form by Neil solo.
All right, next. CD 14. It's called Touch the Night. It's a complete live show at a club called The Catalyst, again in Santa Cruz, California, February 7th, 1984. What's the representative track here?
Okay, the representative track is Barstool Blues.
Oh, version of
Here,
that song.
yeah, here we have another rocker from Zuma. Earlier on the disc we had Driving Back, and now we're hitting Barstool Blues. This show is fabulous, by the way. So the whole recording, the whole show is available on YouTube. This was from February 7th, 1984 at the Catalyst in Santa Cruz, which is the same venue that he would record 6 years later. He would record Way Down in the Rust Bucket,
Yeah,
which is
which
one
is
of the highlights
awesome.
from the previous archives
Yeah,
sets.
right.
Yeah, just fucking awesome show. But this show is pretty awesome too. It's just him banging out. And it's interesting that it comes here in February of '84. This is him in the middle of right coming off of his trans and everybody's rockin' phase, and right before he segued into his old ways,
Yeah,
sort of cowpoke country
yeah.
phase, like really just sort of blatantly corny as hell, like old school
Mm,
fiddle country.
yeah.
But here he does this show with Crazy Horse where they just bash out and they're doing, and so what it is it's got several new songs that he had just written, one called Rock, which
Mm,
which begins this set, and it's just one of these big dopey intentionally bad Crazy Horse songs with just a badass riff, and
yeah.
bizarrely with Ben Keith on tenor saxophone
Huh.
in the midst of all this rocking out. And there's three songs that made it onto Landing on Water, and they're way better here than they are in Landing on Water, with just Crazy Horse bashing it out. There's a really great version of Violent Side, but
Mm,
then the second half of the show, like he starts off with like all these new songs, but then he does this awesome version of Powderfinger, which is
mm,
not actually on this Touch the Night disc.
mm.
This disc has 8 songs from that show. And then Welfare Mothers, there's an awesome version of Welfare Mothers, which does make this disc. So this is the one disc from this set that I'm most looking forward to hearing in its entirety when it comes out,
Right.
because the version on YouTube of the show is bootleg quality, and
Oh,
so I want to hear it, with the formal soundboard recording. Uh, I'm really really looking forward to it. So this is probably the highlight of the entire set is this disc and this show, which is him. And it's almost inexcusable when you think about it that he was still capable of bashing out like this, even while he was making all that garbage
yeah.
in the midst
I
of it.
mean,
So almost
yeah,
inexcusable. Like he could have done like a Crazy Horse record and an inspired Crazy Horse record apparently in 1984 if he had wanted to, but
right.
apparently he didn't want to.
CD 15. It's called Gray Riders. Now, this is another mishmash. It's live recordings from a club called the Saddle Rack in San Jose, California, June 6th, 1984. Select live recordings from the September October US tour in 1984. Recording sessions in Franklin, Tennessee on June 30th and July 1st, 1985, back to back days, and select live recordings from the August September US tour 1985. Chris, what's the representative track here?
The representative track is a real piece of crap called This Old House. It's not a very good song at all. It's well intended, and
Yeah,
this is Farm Aid started right around the same time. The Farm Aid show I think it was actually September
right,
of 1985 that the
right.
first Farm Aid show was played, and so Neil was on. At the time this corporate agriculture was just starting to fuck with family farms
Right.
back then. So, you started to have these people, these multi-generational farmers that were losing their farms.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to do a song that really paid attention to that. Too bad it had to be this song, though.
Yeah.
It was recorded at a live show in Springfield, Missouri on August 12th, 1985, with a band that he was calling the International Harvesters, which essentially was the Stray Gators with Rufus Thibodeau on fiddle.
Yeah.
But this song is just, it's so bad. I mean, the chorus, I'm quoting the chorus, "This old house of ours is built on dreams, and a businessman don't know what that means. There's a swing outside they play on every day, but tomorrow morning a man from the bank is gonna come and take it all away."
Hmm.
It's kind of pretty morose.
Yeah, well, I mean that's what in the mid '80s, it's the peak
Yeah.
of Reaganomics. It was also during this time. Neil Young is known for being a left-wing liberal in his political activism. However, during this time, he started adopting a conservative pose and
Yeah.
started basically saying nice things about Reagan and promoting
Oh yeah,
certain right-wing
he was
views.
definitely like Hawks and Doves is a very neoconish type of record,
Yeah.
you know.
And I wonder how much of it was sincere and how much of it was him just, trolling the media.
Yeah, it could be that was trolling, but this song, yeah, the heart is in its right place, but the song is just corny as hell, and
Yeah.
it's just bad, and it's pretty insufferable. But at least his heart was in the right place. Worth mentioning that most of this disc was originally released as a live album called A Treasure back in
Uh-huh.
2011, which
Mm.
is basically songs from the same tour that he did with the International Harvesters. And
Yeah.
one of the highlights of that disc are two songs. There's a version of "Are You Ready for the Country" from
Right.
Harvest, which is
Right.
actually really well done, and they're really, really, really ready for the country on this one. It's a very, very country-esque version of "Are You Ready for the Country." And
Yeah.
then there's another song which I believe is on Old Ways as well, called "It Might Have Been," which actually
Mm.
dates back to the mid '70s. We talked about it. There's
Yeah.
actually a demo on one of the previous discs that is on there. But this version was recorded at the Austin City Limits in 1984. So actually, a pretty good live disc. And so, you know, but most of it is, again, like we said, has previously been released
Yeah.
on this disc, A Treasure. So, yeah, but the representative track is a piece of crap, and by far the worst song on this whole disc.
Yeah. All right. Next, CD 16 is called Road of Plenty. It's again select songs from an actual studio album that you can listen to on Spotify, Landing on Water from 1986, and select live recordings from his September, October, November US tour in 1986. Chris, what's the representative track here?
Hey, newsflash, there is no representative track from CD 16 on the takes disc. Apparently, it's so bad that he could discard it as part of this takes disc. So essentially, it's all those songs from Landing on Water, which, by the way, has one classic. Most of
Yeah.
it is crap, but there is one song from Landing on Water which is wonderful, called "Hippie Dream,"
Mm.
which is basically his slam of David Crosby,
Uh-huh.
of basically lamenting the fact that they talked about the wooden ships back in the
Yeah.
day, but it became a hippie dream because of drug addiction.
Mm.
And so it's a real lament, but it's a really great song, and a surprisingly great song. It's like this out of nowhere, like among this big losing streak, he has this really great little song in there. So
Right.
if there was to be a representative track, it would probably be "Hippie Dream." But
Yeah.
the only new stuff on it, at the end of this disc, most of it is from Landing on Water. There's three songs that make it to the end of this disc, and that he did with Crazy Horse on a tour in the fall of 1986. There's a song called "Road of Plenty." There's
Hmm.
another song called "We Never Danced," and
Yeah.
another song called "When Your Lonely Heart Breaks."
Hmm.
And these are all previously unreleased songs that he did in the fall of '86 on tour with Crazy Horse.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but apparently it's so bad that it doesn't even deserve a representative track on the takes disc.
Yeah. Yeah. This archive, this volume of the archive series starts to peter toward the end, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And we come to the vinyl, the final disc, CD 17, Summer Songs. These are solo acoustic recording sessions in his Broken Arrow Ranch studio in 1987. What's the representative track here?
Okay, the representative track here is actually a really great song called "Last of His Kind," and
Uh-huh.
it's also about the struggling and fading farmer. If this old house was kind of his awful, corny, terrible lament, this one
Yeah.
is his actual sincere, wonderful, beautifully written lament
Hmm.
about the the farmer becoming the last of his kind, or the farmer may be the last of a dying breed is actually a lyric on it. But it's another one of these self-recorded ones. He actually did these. Him and Nico Bolas, that guy Nico Bolas, who produced "This Note's for You" and "Freedom." He This whole disc comes out of sessions that he did at the Broken Arrow Ranch in 1987 with Nico Bolas.
Okay.
And apparently, it was previously released as exclusive release on through Neil Young's Archives website. And
Okay.
I didn't find any of this on YouTube, or at least any of the other studio these tracks from that. But some of these songs will sound familiar, from these sessions. Some of the songs include "American Dream," which was released as part of a CSNY reunion record in 1990.
Right.
"Someday," which is on Freedom.
Yeah.
"One of These Days," which makes Harvest Moon.
Yeah.
"Wrecking Ball," which is from Freedom,
Yeah.
and then "Last of His Kind." It's interesting. He does performances of this on Farm Aid shows. So
Mm.
if you want to see like a really great version of this song from Farm Aid 6 in 1993, it's him and Willie Nelson
Uh-huh.
doing a version of "Last of His Kind."
So how many songs from this disc actually made it onto future albums?
Let me see. One, two, three, four, at least five.
At least five. Okay.
Yeah. So,
Interesting. Okay.
but they made them in different versions. Not these versions made them
Right.
onto
Yeah,
other
yeah.
songs.
Revised versions,
Yeah.
reworked versions.
And so
Yeah.
this is essentially, and this is Neil doing all the music himself. Like this song, the synclavier is back on this song.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
guitar, harmonica, synclavier, and vocals.
Yeah.
But it on the other songs,
Wrecking
it's
Ball and
either
Hanging on a Limb made it to Freedom. I know that.
yeah, yeah. Those songs were on Freedom, and "Someday" is on Freedom too.
Yeah.
And but it's just him doing solo takes either with piano or guitar
Right. Right.
on this, and so that actually disc is one I'm looking forward to catching up on too. I think
Yeah.
that'll be a highlight of this series. Again, there's some of these discs, like some of these live shows, and this disc in particular, which is sort of like and also disc 4, which has primitive versions. That's the one where he does all the songs with Linda Ronstadt and Nicolette Larson
Mm.
singing
Right.
backup.
Right.
Sort of primitive early versions of songs that found the light of day elsewhere. Those are the things I'm looking forward to most in hearing, from this whole set. I think there's a remarkable sweep from 76 to 1987. I think you pointed it out. It kind of shows he's traveling from the height of his powers to the nadir.
Yeah.
And then this last disc
He's
represents the
starting.
comeback.
He's coming out of the funk. Yeah.
Yeah, this represents the comeback. So it's kind of the up and then way down and then starts to come up again. He's tailing up at the end of the end of this set. So I said the disc. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple Music, and it's also on YouTube. Neil releases all his music for free on YouTube. And so
Mm.
all of
Yeah.
his official releases are available for free on YouTube,
Right.
so you don't even have to pay for them. So go check them out there. But yeah, so another fascinating exercise in Neil emptying out his vaults. Art,
Yes,
any
I'm
final
going to add
thoughts?
something. Yeah,
Yeah,
my final thought is I'm really looking forward to Archive Volume 4 because
yeah,
that is what represents Neil Young's Renaissance period. Because
yeah,
remember, starting with Freedom in 1989, he went on a run of great albums. 1990, Ragged Glory, 92, Harvest Moon, which is like his sequel to Harvest. What's the name? The
Rest Never
album
Sleeps.
Russ Never Sleeps. No, not Russ Never Sleeps.
Oh, what's the name of it? Sleeps with
The one
Angels.
from 1994, Sleeps with Angels, a
Sleeps with
great
Angels.
album
Excuse
that
me.
he put
That
out
was his
after
best album
COVID.
since Rust
Russ
Never
Never
Sleeps.
Sleeps. Yeah. And
Yeah.
the 1995 album that he did with Girl,
Mirrorball.
which I think is great, Mirrorball. And I actually like, I think Broken Arrow from 1996 is all right. There are like some
Yeah,
three
yeah.
really
Broken
good
Arrow's
tracks
got
on
some
it.
decent stuff on it. It's
Yeah.
kind of a it's kind of a half-ass record in the sense
Yeah.
it's got like four great tracks and then some throwaways.
Yeah. But
But
anyway,
yeah,
the fourth volume of this archive series is what I'm looking forward to because this represents Neil Young, like his comeback, him getting back and being great again, and claiming his throne as like, one of the all-time great rock artists. So
yeah, and it's worth mentioning, by the way, that the box set not only comes with 17 CDs, it comes with five Blu-ray discs
yeah,
of performances. So
right,
Across the Water is one of the discs, which I'm assuming is just performances from both the Odeon and Budokan shows.
right,
He's got Boarding House and Rust Never Sleeps. He's got those on disc. Human Highway, which is his film he did
yeah,
as Shaky. He's got Trans,
right,
and he's got a show from Berlin that makes it
mm,
to Blu-ray 3. He's got a set from The Catalyst
yeah,
on the fourth Blu-ray disc. He's got one of the things is called Solo Trans, which I'm
mm,
assuming is just him doing acoustic versions of the songs from Trans.
right.
And Blu-ray disc number 5 has a film on it called In a Rusted Out Garage, which I'm
Oh,
assuming is be like Crazy Horse from around the Renaissance period
right,
in
right.
Ragged Glory. So worth mentioning that it's got these Blu-rays too. So eventually this will be released widely, or at least on the streaming services. But for now, there's only these 5,000 copies, which have probably already been sold. There actually
Yeah.
were 5,000 people that were willing to spend $450 for this tower of CDs.
I was trying to convince you to buy it.
Yeah, but I haven't owned a CD player in my house. I have one in my car. I have kind of an old car, but I haven't had a CD
Hey
player in my
wifey,
house.
hey wifey. I'm gonna spend the next 2 weeks driving the car by myself a lot, listening to music. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, and I just spent $450. They showed the picture of it. It's probably the size of my. It goes up to my desktop, like the top of my desk that I'm sitting at here recording this
Yeah,
episode. It's probably that high. It's like
yeah,
you could probably like put a sheet over it and make it into a
yeah,
coffee table.
yeah, yeah,
It's kind of crazy, but
yeah.
so eventually this will all get released, and eventually we'll all be on Neil Young's channels on YouTube. But for
Yeah.
now, hopefully we have been a good tour guide and able stewards for your listening pleasure. We will have our Spotify playlist that'll have all this music on it, and a good time will be had by all. Right, Art?
Yes.
Gotcha. And with that said, as we always do at the end of these episodes, we encourage you to join our fabulous Facebook Curmudgeonly community, where Art's been posting a lot of Neil Young stuff this week, and we've been getting some good interaction lately with other folks. We actually did, in one instance, did some tape trading with my friend Mike Essie, and so good stuff there. Join us there at facebook.com/groups/curmudgeonrock. If you have any thoughts about any of this music, if you actually think This Old House is a good song, you can feel free to let us know. You can email us at curmudgeonrock@gmail.com. And as I mentioned, we'll have that Spotify playlist that'll have all 16 songs from the Takes disc, plus some of the other songs that I mentioned as well. Will also be on that playlist, and and you can find the link for that in the episode description, whether you find it on Apple Music or on Amazon Podcasts or on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll be able to get that link and listen to this music as you listen to us